Set the seal and log the envoy's departure. If they survive even 10 rotations, I'll eat my rank medallion. High Marshal Taven didn't wait for acknowledgement. His second pair of eyelids blinked out of sequence, a Darnax tick of contempt, as he turned from the observation tier and stalked past the delegation row. His gait was clipped, deliberate, echoing through the chamber's marbled perimeter. On the raised platform at the chamber's center, a hexagonal transit ring shimmered faintly. The final human transport module had just passed through, sealed in a quantum shunt bound for the Class 0 planet designated Darnax 6. A glint of frost clung to the ring's rim, a residual trace from the transit window's collapse. Sub-Prelate Corinne kept his hands folded behind his back. 142 Terrans, he murmured. No escort, no atmospheric prep, no signal beacon. They're not suicidal. They're making a point. Fen pivoted sharply. They're making a spectacle, one that ends with starved bones in lava ash. This was never meant to be a rescue mission. Corinne, it's compliance theater. Let the galaxy see what Terran arrogance breeds. Above them, rows of Dominion counselors stirred with restrained murmurs, their heads casting elongated shadows beneath the amber light streaming through lattice-like canopy shutters. Flashes from heads-up displays mounted to their seats tracked the drop parameters. Gravity loads, chemical surface index, pathogen density, all off the scale. No resupply permissions, no protective domes. The humans had accepted every term. Across the chamber's side aisle, the Earth delegation stood unmoving, 5 figures in black exoformal wear. No speech, no objection, only a single capsule, delivered earlier, coordinates signed in Terran glyphs, and a biometric stamp from their deployment lead, Commander Halric Dorn. Corin exhaled through his upper vents, the heat causing a faint ripple against his vision. You ever wonder what kind of man volunteers for planetary extinction? Vaughn sneered, the kind who dies quietly. Below, the transmission feed displayed a real-time orbital snapshot of Darnax 6, an unstable planet writhing beneath permanent storm cover. Hydrogen surge lightning snapped from continent to continent in disjointed intervals. Surface temperatures rose and fell within lethal margins in under 6 hours. Gravity rifts near the equator shifted local terrain by several meters monthly. Dominion's zoological classifiers had marked the planet as inhospitable to complex bio, and Earth sent people there. The Dominion's monitoring equipment had been pre-deployed weeks prior, drones embedded into orbit and crater rims, disguised beneath mimic alloys. The heads-up feeds began cycling between them now, atmospheric volatility readings, seismic distortions, unidentifiable megafauna markers, and no signs of structured movement. More troubling was the drone feedback. Several units were already showing signal inconsistencies, feed disruption, static overlays. None of the onboard dampeners should have malfunctioned. Not at this early stage. Corin keyed a side console and scanned the latest recovery logs. 3 drone clusters already offline, environmental misreadings or something else. Everett waved a hand. It's Darnax. The planet eats equipment. You worry too much. A Dominion adjutant approached and bowed low. High Marshal, the Terran representatives have declined the post-trial dialogue slot. They've already departed the Conclave Tower. No transmission requests filed. Fenz's eyes narrowed. No closing statements? Not even a farewell gesture? Nothing, sir. One of them left a datapad in the envoy dock. It bore a single entry. Logged for outcome? He scoffed. Cryptic nonsense. They're hoping to turn martyrdom into narrative. Corin didn't reply. His gaze was locked on one of the malfunctioning drone feeds, its frame caught mid-flesh as something tore across the visual range. Not a creature. A structure, maybe? No. Too early. Too symmetrical. He keyed the frame forward. It was gone. Outside the chamber, transport corridors pulsed as dignitaries returned to their respective sectors. Inside, the final procedural announcement echoed from the chamber intercom. This conclave ratifies Dominion Ritual Compliance Trial 3884A. Participating non-Dominion party, Earth Union. Test site, Darnax 6. Population inserted, 142. Observation mode, non-intrusive. Compliance period, 100 planetary cycles. Success metric, survival and adaptation. No further commentary was given, no reaction from the Earth delegation. And yet, in the Dominion's orbital observation wing, technician Vern Levesque hunched over the input buffer, jaw set tight. Reformat cluster feed, we've lost motion tracking. Atmospheric pressure readings just tripled inside the anomaly range. The console sparked briefly before the feed dissolved into cascading data clutter. Levesque muttered under his breath, "Where the hell did they go?" The recording stamp blinked once, then stopped. Feed loss. All remaining visuals collapsed into layered static. In the chamber below, Corin stepped away from the main platform. "Tiven, something's not aligning." The High Marshal didn't respond. His gaze was locked on the heads-up display now stuck in a frozen image. The Terran module descending into a storm bank, its structure intact, trajectory uncorrected. Corin's eyes traced the cracked ceremonial plaque delivered from Darnax 3 days prior. The one sent as a gesture of participation from Earth. It now sat on a pedestal in the gallery alcove. Fissures ran through its base, not from damage, but from stress expansion, as though it had been molded at core temperatures. "We sent them into fire," Corin murmured. "But we didn't send them blind." In the Dominion's auxiliary observatory, technician Levesque pulled the final recording from a fallback buffer. Thermal signature analysis. What he saw made him freeze. Subterranean temperature bloom. Too regular, too deliberate, arrayed in a geometric pattern along a tectonic shelf. The feed cut. Levesque whispered, "That's a grid. Cluster V9 is offline. That's not interference. That's a full sensor collapse." Technician Hibrek jabbed at the console, knuckles pale beneath his scaled skin. The data stream hadn't just stuttered. It had flatlined. The thermal overlays, once layered in volcanic reds and glacial blues, now looped in erratic grayscale pulses. He adjusted the focal index. Nothing corrected. Across the observation vault, Dominion analysts fell into a hush frenzy, the room thick with a kind of static unease not spoken aloud. Commander Resh Varen, oversight lead for surface telemetry, stepped behind Hivik. His breath was tight with the recycled bite of copper-rich air scrubbers. "Try uplink through Relay 12. I want altitude vectors from the Eastern Hemisphere. If they're jamming, it's active, not planetary interference." The weapons crunched behind him. Hay Refuke gritted his fangs. "We designed V9 for frequency scatter across 6 layers. They'd need harmonic resonance injection to even touch our signal integrity. Then you tell me how a group of Terrans with boots on magma pulled it off." Rivik didn't answer. Across the Dominion orbital annex, the inquiry panel sat in staggered tiers behind sound-dampened partitions. Corin leaned forward, speaking low into his internal comm. "Flag this moment. Feed collapse. All recorders logged timestamp, market vanishing point." On his data slate, the subroutine tagged the line and auto-generated a file name. Phase incomplete. He turned his eyes to the far window. The crescent of Darnax 6 loomed, partially obscured by ash drift in upper orbit. The planet's fractured crust lines shimmered faintly through the haze. The last transmission from V9 showed a geometric burn pattern near the southern rift. Too regular, too even? Structures? Possibly. But the footage fragmented before analysis confirmed anything conclusive. Corin opened his encrypted message node. The draft addressed to the Dominion's high strategic chamber sat unsent. It read, "Initial conclusions ignored. Earth is not improvising. They are deploying something layered. Recommend review of treaty optics before intervention becomes retaliation." He tapped the seal function. It rejected transmission. Access blocked. He tried again. Same lock. Red warning frame slid across his display. Archival only. External messaging restricted. He stared at the words. They had sealed him out. In the lower surveillance deck, a comms operator barked across the room. Cluster D7 showing heat plumes in Quadrant 9, not surface venting, it's pulsed, cyclical, repeating every 22 seconds. Commander Varen narrowed his eyes. Power grid signature? Negative on any Dominion standard, the pattern's not natural. The room fell still. Operators glanced between screens, each pulse tick sounding like a countdown. Varen turned toward Hrivek. Has Earth made contact? No transmissions, not even carrier pings. What about public channels? Crack checked. They've published nothing, no feeds, no diplomatic rebuttals, it's dead air. Varen's jaw flexed. They're forcing us to guess. A sudden spike in ambient interference jolted the auxiliary systems. Half the observation feeds blinked out. The room dropped into reactive mode. Commands, recalibrations, fail-safes, tripped in sequence. Still, the visuals didn't return. Over the next 2 minutes, only one stream remained. A single thermal camera clinging to orbital rotation. It captured nothing but the glow of a distant crater rim, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. Corrin stood in the far archway. We've made a miscalculation. Varen turned, expression sharp. Speak for your department. You're treating this like a transmission fault. It's not. It's information denial by intent. And it's not random. Varen advanced a step. You're suggesting humans, in under 2 cycles, buried our sensor net? I'm saying they brought something we haven't accounted for. That implies premeditation. Corrin nodded. Or preparation. And we never thought to ask what they didn't say. Across the Dominion Capital Complex, secure zones began receiving update notices, not from Central Command, but from internal intelligence offshoots. Each marked provisional disturbance. One flagged file attached. Observed, not obvious. Quarian's internal memo, scrubbed of authorship. He stared at the screen. His warning had been stripped of context and turned into background filler. Strategic camouflage. Inside the Earth delegation's quarters, now dark and abandoned, a single beacon remained active. A physical one, not digital. A crystalline cube the size of a clenched fist, resting in a compartmental field. It emitted no signal. It recorded nothing. It simply reflected any light around it, with fractal refraction, spinning slow on its axis, untouched. A Thalvrax aide had been dispatched to retrieve it, but when he touched the field, it triggered a reaction. The cube hardened instantly, dense, opaque. No force could pry it loose. The report labeled it non-responsive artifact. Back in orbit, Varen pulled the master registry from the planetary surveillance module. We can't lose an entire planet's worth of visual feed. You already have, Corrin said. They didn't vanish. They pulled the curtain. The final image recorded before V9's failure appeared once more on the master screen. The thermal array lit a distinct outline. Not bodies, not machines. Architecture. Sharp-angled lines embedded into a cliffside. Patterned in arcs with concentric junctions. Energy dispersal nodes? Stabilizers? One engineer whispered, "It looks like they're anchoring the crust." The feed ended. And for the first time since the trial began, no one in the room spoke. The drone returned. 1 out of 49. Corrin's statement cut through the chamber like a scalpel. His voice carried no urgency, but each syllable pressed down with weight. Before him, Dominion counselors leaned forward behind tiered consoles, the rising tension reflected in their widened pupils. The surviving drone, marked Unit AX-24, drifted into view on the overhead screen. Its surface was pitted from thermal stress and abrasive impact. Static flickered across its casing, a consequence of re-entry turbulence. But the core recorder module remained intact. The first image filled the central wall. An angular bunker, reinforced with basalt-hardened plates, stood embedded into the eastern cliffside. Ventilation ducts made from chitinous fauna shells curved into the rock, cycling plumes of steam. Terran insignia had been etched into the entrance wall with plasma-burned grooves. It glowed with residual heat. Corrin didn't wait for commentary. Date stamped, Cycle 12. Across the floor, murmurs shifted to low whispers. High Marshal Tivan slammed a palm against his station. Impossible. This footage is fabricated. Terra doesn't possess ground molders capable of working Darnax crust. They didn't land with drills. They had no pre-built caches. Corin changed the slide. A series of vertical pylons dotted the canyon floor, each wrapped in a coil network drawing voltage from subcrust currents. Animals, large, sinewed quadrupeds with ridged backs and segmented jaws, were being held within modular containment fields. A Terran volunteer in reinforced environmental armor adjusted the relay points. A second technician moved nearby, recording voltage fluxes on a handheld terminal fashioned from broken Dominion alloy. Counselor Drek, a logistics chief from the Valyun sector, leaned forward. That's fauna containment and bioelectric energy repurposing. They're not just surviving, they're designing infrastructure. Corin's next slide showed a wide-angle scan of a geothermal tower, its core glowing from stabilized magma vents. In the corner, Dominion beacon pylons had been rearranged, no longer transmitting, now framing a perimeter. Their frequency units had been inverted, territory marked. Their engineers flipped our survey gear into border markers, Corin said flatly. High Marshal Twen's color shifted. This is tactical theater. Earth planted the footage. Counselor Drame barked a bitter laugh. On a Class 0 Deathworld? While under live planetary surveillance? Corin switched again. The final recording showed interior structures, dome lattices anchored into igneous ridges, polyfiber conduits woven from flora sinew lined with internal lighting. One dome bore a central plaque, SC7//grid secured. A Terran, face obscured by heat gear, installed a resonance bolt into the wall. The bolt sparked. The wall trembled, but held. Tven stood. This is propaganda. Then prove it, Corin replied. Pull footage from another drone. Show us the real condition of Darnax. Tven sat down without speaking. Back in the Dominion's classified intelligence wing, the footage caused instant cascade protocol triggers. 10 military observers logged formal requests for secondary reviews. 4 mid-tier factions demanded access to raw drone data, and one unknown user, operating from an unregistered console, extracted the full data cache and uploaded it to a closed-loop thread shared with 56 independent counselors. The leak began. Within 2 hours, the footage was playing in auxiliary chambers across 5 Dominion sectors. Mid-rank analysts circulated it under the unofficial label Operation Rooted Stone. Back inside Earth's orbital shadow facility, Commander Halric Dorn finished his dictation log. His voice held none of the theatricality common in military briefings, only measured thought. Grid Gelta holds. Tectonic stabilizers within 5% variance. Southern vent line cooled faster than expected. We rechanneled intake through auxiliary ridge. Fauna Pen 3 is showing reproductive cycle acceleration. We are ahead of the cycle map. Let the footage do the speaking. He paused, then added a final sentence. We are not repairing, we are redefining. The recorder clicked off. Across the makeshift operations table, First Engineer Jern Vek leaned in. You think they'll interpret the footage as a threat? Dorn didn't look up. They'll see us standing where death should have claimed us. That's worse. The smell of stone coolant hung in the air, mineral rich and dense, laced with the heat of cracked rock vents. The floor beneath them vibrated every 16 seconds, the rhythm of the stabilizer grid resonating through the cliff structure. It wasn't silence, it was movement held steady. Vek walked toward the dome entrance, brushing dust from the intake meters. Tower 4 intercepted another Dominion scanner pulse. We mirrored it back with randomized noise. Good. Let them wonder why their own data doesn't match. In orbit, High Marshal Tven received an encrypted transmission from the Dominion's trade network director. 2 trade lines through the Karun Drift had been rerouted. The stabilizer grid on Darnax had disrupted subspace navigation paths. Ships had lost gyroscopic control when passing within range. The cause? Gravitational reordering from human seismic reconfiguration. Twins' claws dug into the console. They've shifted planetary drift vectors. Back in the Earth delegation chamber, now sealed, unlit, and unoccupied, a final projector frame remained active beneath the table. A rotating map of Darnax 6 displayed grid sectors marked in human glyphs. Each zone bore a color grade, not based on threat, but on utility. Blue for power, green for harvest, gray for expansion, red for off-limits, and at the center, T0 core, VEC. Adjust the anchor grid by 3 degrees. Crust shift just dragged Tower 7 half a meter west. Commander Dorn crouched beside the terrain relay, his hands coated in ash-layered mineral grease. The ground beneath him vibrated in timed pulses, a rhythm his bones had begun to memorize. A slow, constant cadence driven by subterranean conversion cores repurposed from raw geothermal venting. Each tremor confirmed another layer of control. Vec's boots scraped across the obsidian-packed slope. He keyed into the relay box, the coil nodes sparking faintly as they realigned. If this shift keeps accelerating, we'll lose lateral sync on the stabilizer's edge clusters. We're not losing anything, Dorn replied. We'll rewrite the alignment. Steam hissed from the ridge's fracture line. The heat radiating from the vent nearly singed the exposed alloy of Vec's respirator seal. The air tasted like pulverized quartz, dry, biting, almost granular against the tongue. In the distance, a shimmer of motion crossed the field. A pack beast, bridled with bark fiber harnesses, hauled bundles of exoflora toward the refinery. A pair of Terran volunteers moved behind it, guiding its path through ridged gravel, each step steady despite the rough terrain. Their movements reflected coordination honed over sleepless weeks, not by drills, but by need. Inside the central dome, Dorn tapped a marker into the basalt floor. The tool etched a deep groove along a circular lattice, part of the internal map now being hand-carved onto the dome's foundation. No screens, no digital projectors. If the grid failed, the map would remain. Tactile. Permanent. Jern Vec entered a moment later, unsealing his helmet and wiping condensation from the inside lining. Sector 3's corrals held, the alpha herds nesting in containment. We harvested enough sinew from the lower strata to begin fiber spinning. I've started forming guild assignments. Separate them by strain, yield, and tensile flexibility. I want groups with pattern specialization. 1 per dome. Dorn ordered. Vec blinked, then asked, We're organizing by industry now? We're not colonizing, we're establishing foundation logic. The words felt heavier than intended. Dorn didn't elaborate. He stepped back toward the central support beam and removed a small item from his field pack. A locket. The casing was worn from constant handling. Inside, a data crystal, no longer active. The crystal didn't hold schematics or codes. It contained a voice. He placed it beneath the Terra Amper, not as tribute. As a reminder, Vec observed quietly. She wouldn't want a grave. Dorn stared at the floor. It's not a grave. It's an origin point. Vec nodded once and returned to his tasks. Outside, the mineral-weaving teams had begun constructing the first full-strength structural net. The exoflora collected across multiple biomes had been hardened using heat treatment and compressed tension frames. The fibers crackled as they twisted under pull. Volunteers worked in rows, their hands red from the coarse texture but not slowing. They were silent, not by order, but by discipline. Every action had purpose. Dorn crossed toward the perimeter watch point, where scaffolding rose over the cliff wall. From here, the main conduit lines snaked down into the earth, threaded into the geothermal sink. Heat regulators, jury-rigged from salvaged drone limbs, rotated at slow intervals, dispersing pressure without triggering collapse. He adjusted one of the distribution valves manually. The handle burned against his palm, even through gloves. The pain was real. Grounding. In his field terminal, he keyed a new log entry. 47 days since descent. Atmospheric breaches now manageable within reinforced sections. Stabilizer yield is above predicted curve. Grid cohesion remains intact. No external contact. Mission remains unspoken. The last line wasn't protocol. It was doctrine. Behind him, Vec returned carrying a cluster of hardened roots. Botany unit isolated a secondary source of subsoil extract. Nutritional content is borderline edible, can be refined if soaked and crushed. Dorn raised a brow. You think the Dominion expects us to forage? Vec grinned. I think the Dominion expects bones and char. Dorn didn't smile back. Then let's show them blueprints and fuel cells. As dusk fell, the glow from the geothermal towers intensified, bathing the canyon in gold-red reflections. The ridgelines sharpened in shadow and the air dropped into its nightly freeze. Crystalline frost formed along conduit tips, reacting to the fluctuating steam release. Everything built here fought entropy. The base of Tower 1 bore the etched letters HD//STN1. It was a quiet designation, but not anonymous. Before returning to the inner chamber, Dorn passed the southern wall where the first volunteers had carved the phrase gridform//path claimant. It wasn't a slogan. It was a timestamp. He stood in the center of the dome as the stabilizer pulsed once more. Steady. Unflinching. Dorn closed the logbook and looked up. This was not recovery. This was architecture. The footage has been verified across 6 Dominion servers. Denial is no longer a defense. It is a liability. Colonial analyst Strand Caven stood beneath the vaulted ceiling of the Atrax assembly, flanked by 2 aides who hadn't spoken since the hearing began. The floor beneath him flickered, not with light, but with movement. Scaly feet shifting, robes brushing against support rods, talons tapping impatiently. Counselors from 14 sectors watched from tiered balconies, some wide-eyed, others rigid with locked jaws and folded arms. On the central display column, a still frame from the drone leak hovered in stasis. Terran geothermal towers threading into tectonic faults, redirecting Darnax 6's thermal output into structured flow channels. Territory redefined through design, not war. A low thermal bloom readout rotated in the corner. Cavan's voice remained firm. Our charter classified the Deathworld trial as non-expansionary. Earth accepted, and then converted the terrain into a power grid. Counselor Vren of the Calarn Circuit hissed through a narrowed throat. Their silence is strategy. They never disputed the terms. They obeyed the letter and redefined the outcome. From the upper dais, High Marshal Tven glared down without blinking. His voice cracked across the chamber with the sharpness of a blade drawn too quickly. They are violating Dominion sovereignty through unacknowledged infrastructure. Terraforming equals occupation. Kevin didn't flinch. Then why did we not include any clause prohibiting terrain adaptation? The room shifted again. Small movements, weight transfers, head turns. Uncertainty moved like current through water. Even those who supported Twen weren't echoing him now. Corin sat quietly near the rear, his hands folded around a neural slate. The memo he had submitted 2 cycles ago, titled Observed Not Obvious, had been redacted and reclassified. Yet now, counselors quoted it in fragments, passing pieces to one another like contraband. Tven slammed his fist against his table. The carved Dominion sigil inset in the panel fractured down the center. A shard clattered onto the floor, its edges jagged. The footage is bait, Tven spat. They wanted us to see it. This is psychological assault. Counselor Dreckley leaned forward. Then why hasn't Earth broadcast anything further? Silence fell. Not the atmospheric kind, but the human kind, born from withheld expectation. No one answered, because there was no tactic to frame it. Earth hadn't issued demands. Earth hadn't spoken. Earth had built, and let observation do the rest. Counselor Pricks from the outer fringe, usually neutral, broke ranks. My colonies on Varnor Delta have refused to receive Dominion trade vessels. They cited fear of reprisal. Not from Earth, but from fallout if we escalate. Another voice followed. Clythene Spires has suspended its compliance levy. They are quoting line 43B of the Defense Entanglement Treaty. Voluntary withdrawal in case of unilateral escalation. Fenn's claws raked across his interface panel. You think abandoning order will save you? No, Kaven replied. We think maintaining illusion will destroy us faster. A ripple of digital alerts chimed across several consoles. Memos, files, packets opened across council desks. Redacted documents restored. A feed dump from unknown internal access. Among them, environmental analysis, grid expansion data, flora bioconversion specs. All Terran origin, all leaked. Counselor Corin, elderly and seldom heard, turned his eyes toward the image feed. Asset recovery, unfeasible, he read aloud. Is this the new classification? Fenn didn't answer. A secondary panel opened on the side wall. It displayed a rerouting order from the Dominion trade fleet. All vessels circumventing the Karun Drift, the space corridor closest to Darnax 6. The reason listed was gravitational instability from crustal interference. Kevin keyed his tablet. Their stabilizers are affecting our travel vectors. And we can't even remove them, Vran added, not without violating our own compliance terms. Tvin stood again, shoulders drawn high. If we do not respond with full suppression protocol, the Dominion falls into irrelevance. No, Corin said finally, voice low but unyielding. If we strike, we confirm everything they intended to expose. The weight of that statement struck harder than any prior debate. It reframed the entire encounter. Earth hadn't escalated. They had built. And waited. Fenn walked slowly to the central stand. His voice, once iron, now grated with forced calm. Then propose an action, subprelate. If you know the consequence of striking, what is the alternative? The roar looked across the fractured council, no longer rows of order, but fragments of agendas, reactions, and fear. Withdraw from observance, he said. Acknowledge territorial adaptation, and classify Darnax as terror. You mean surrender? Thane's tone was bitter as rot. I mean survival. In the corridors beyond, aides relayed the meeting's outcome in coded bursts. 4 sectors initiated internal autonomy protocols. 2 disconnected entirely from Dominion relay networks. Dissent moved not through armies, but through decisions. Back in the chamber, Kaven closed his case file and walked out. He didn't look at Tven. Didn't need to. The fractured sigil still lay on the floor. No one picked it up. Fleet identification masked. External shell signatures read as medical freighters, but intake burn rates show military-grade cores. Commander Dorn stared at the orbital feed inside the core dome. The relay screen flickered with infrared scans showing the Thalvrax fleet crawling across the edge of Darnax's upper atmosphere. Their formation was disciplined but irregular, staggered in ways designed to evade standard targeting grids. The ships bore white hull plating, emergency beacons flashing green, and externally transmitted tags labeled Health Oversight Convoy. Beck's voice cracked through the intercoms unit. They're not here for observation. Those ships aren't carrying diagnostics. They're running full nav-sync protocols. Dorn didn't respond immediately. He reached toward the seismic console and adjusted the oscillation dampeners along the ridge towers. Below his boots, the floor shivered. Not violently, but with the measured pulse of a system beginning to uncoil. Activate disjunction line. Beck hesitated. We'll blind their fleet vectoring for 3 minutes, maybe 4. If we miscalculate pulse symmetry, we won't. Dorn keyed the final authorization. Above the dome, anchored deep into the canyon floor, the embedded relay towers flared. The ground under Tower 6 cracked outward in sharp, spiraling patterns. It was not structural failure. It was the crust's reply to an engineered rupture sequence. Magma-fed stabilizers convulsed once, then stabilized at a new harmonic frequency. In orbit, the Thalvrax vessels adjusted for re-entry and spun. One by one, the vessel's trajectory software failed to align with their gyroscopic tracking. Engines fired into angled drift. Hulls twisted against expected gravitational parameters. Internal stabilizers overcompensated, throwing fleet command into error cascades. Bridge crews scrambled to interpret diagnostics as ship after ship careened into partial orbit loops, never breaching descent velocity but unable to hold formation. On board the lead vessel, Convoy 17N, Tactical Officer Resh Halvin slammed a clawed fist against his rail. Orbital sync has collapsed. Gravity vectors are oscillating. We've lost guidance tethers. Deploy fallback anchors. Anchors are auto-aborting. The planet's field is shifting. It's active. Back on Darnax, Vec monitored from the seismic control deck, his face drenched in sweat. Third pulse holding. All towers stable. Dorn nodded. Route comms to Tower 12. Load the message file. A Terran youth stood in the lower broadcast room, the folds of his exo jacket cut with the same black flecked weave as the original volunteers. He bore no rank, no insignia, but his voice had been trained to pronounce every Dominion dialectal nuance with clinical clarity. He was born in orbit, son of a logistics officer who had perished mid-mill cycle. He adjusted the voice amplifier and waited for the cue. A low red light blinked once, then twice. He spoke. Dominion Registry acknowledges Darnax 6 as undeclared trial zone, activity classified under non-interference clause. You have violated orbital encroachment protocols. The message beamed across all ships simultaneously. This territory has been altered. You may observe but not engage. You will not be warned again. The final line dropped with a deliberate tonal spike, matched perfectly to Dominion diplomatic cadence. This is not your world anymore. On the fleet's lead vessel, the bridge fell into total stillness. Every crew member knew that phrase. It wasn't a threat. It was possession. Dorn shut the transmitter feed. Above them, the fleet drifted. Off balance, unable to correct. One frigate attempted a burn correction and scraped the edge of a magnetic loop, flaring sideways before emergency shutdown. Another ship failed to respond to helm commands entirely, spinning slowly as internal force dampeners failed to account for external pull. Not a single shot had been fired. Orbit scrub complete, Vec confirmed. Telemetry logs tagged, transmitting scrub data to relay backups. In the central hall, Dorn crossed to the observation point. He watched as the Dominion fleet pulled back, their vessels struggling to stabilize trajectories. One limped on broken lateral thrust, trailing faint vapor from a ruptured hull segment, burned, not from weaponry, but from navigational stress. Dorn keyed his field report. Protocol disjunction executed successfully. No casualties. 0 penetrations. Orbit reclaimed. He tapped the panel shut and glanced at the wall, a carved inscription in Terran block code, etched into the stone. Hold the ground, let them slip. The towers rumbled once more before settling into hibernation. The planetary crust responded with a low, rhythmic flex, like a giant inhaling slowly through stone lungs. In orbit, the fleet began retreat protocol. Dominion Command issued no external transmission. They couldn't explain what had happened. And worse, they couldn't reverse it. Entry log // field no Darnax 6 // time index 143 2372 / level secure 4. Operation outcome uncontested, orbital interference deflected, terrain control stabilized, 0 counterforce deployed, human designation, active reinforcement zone. Codename filed, field reversal doctrine, Darnax 6. Commander Dorn stood inside the relay vault as the transmission finalized. Data packets encoded into a triple-spin burst stream pulsed outward. First to Earth's black site relay chain, then deeper into unlinked command arrays beyond system edge. He watched the indicator light turn green, the subtle flick of confirmation against cold stone and insulated alloy. This was not a declaration. It was closure. No ceremony followed. No banners, no speeches, no recognition requests. Dorn pulled the physical cube from its anchor point. The data crystal inside shimmered faintly, layered with heat-sealed compression bands. Etched on one face were 6 characters. FRD D6. He placed it into the containment slot beneath the archiving panel. The console vibrated as the housing slid shut. Locked not by code, but by fingerprinted memory trace. Only someone who had touched the soil would ever access it again. Behind him, First Engineer Vec spoke from the scaffolding. Seismic arrays are sealed, final pulse lock encoded, ridge towers folded inward, redundancy protocols. Hard buried beneath rift bedrock, buried deeper than the first heat line. You'd need to hollow the planet to remove them. Dorn didn't turn around. Then it's done. Outside, the canyon's wind carried dry particulate through fractured scaffolds. Fine grit scraped across glassed polymer, catching faint blue glints from the still septic stabilizer nodes. Nothing here looked military. Everything was industrial, almost abandoned, but functioned with terrifying precision. Beneath Dome 1, the final relay pinged Earth Central. Transmission, full. Response, none. The silence wasn't neglect. It was policy. The volunteers gathered inside the central chamber, now stripped of non-essentials. No one sat. No one spoke. Dorn entered last and laid a single sheet of fiberboard on the command table, burned into its surface. The TerraGrid schematic. Sectioned, finalized. Complete. You're now assigned to Off-World Development Corps, Classification Echo 12. Deployment begins on request. He paused. There will be no citations. This operation never existed. No one objected. They had known from day one. One of the younger builders, fingers still calloused from mineral weaving, asked, "What happens to the tower array?" Beck answered, "It sleeps." Outside the vault, the towers folded inward. The stabilizer grid retracted, disappearing into the crust like bones into soil. No beacon remained. No flare. The ground sealed as if nothing had risen from it. Back on Earth, deep within the War Archive facility in the Southern Highlands, a handler placed a narrow case into a reinforced glass shelf. The item inside wasn't a weapon. It wasn't even marked. It was a locket. The interior data crystal had been cleansed. No playback available. The plaque beside it read, Sector, Darnax 6. EPO non-reactive pipe incident. Session, frozen. In the back of the room, an observer in slate-gray uniform filed a single note into the archive manifest. Asset status, victory archived. Reaction encoded. He made no further entries. Dorn's final log remained on an unlisted drive aboard the orbital courier shuttle bound for the deep line repositories. The entry voice was low, stripped of tone. He shifted their expectations until their structure buckled. We were not forced, we were not armed, we were prepared. He paused. Field reversal was never designed for conflict. It was built to leave them nothing worth striking. The log cut out. Dorn exited the chamber, leaving the schematic behind. As he passed through the pressure-sealed tunnel, the lights flickered once. Recalibrating from active state to dormant watch mode. The colony would stay dormant. Not abandoned. Reclaimed. The trial chamber, once belonging to the Thalvax Dominion, now sat dormant. Its tribunal seats vacant, its ceremonial banners folded and boxed in quiet corners. Where once emissaries debated cycles of suffering as law, only echo recorders remained. They captured nothing. No verdicts, no declarations, only absence. The compliance trials were gone, without announcement, without public repeal, simply removed from the doctrine index as if they had never existed. The shift wasn't authored by treaty. It was enforced by memory. 6 cycles after the last drone transmission from Darnax 6, a neutral academic delegation on the planet Marn Vallis received unmarked courier packets containing orbital survey data and coordinates to 2 new Class 0 planetary bodies. Both bore mild radiation scars and confirmed tremor ranges exceeding standard colonization risk limits. The packets didn't name Earth, but embedded in the file was a familiar symbol, angular, burnt into every tower wall on Darnax, the terraform compliance crest. No message followed, no demands, just coordinates and heat map overlays. Across 10 outer rim systems, rumors spiraled faster than any transmission feed. First came reports of mining drones vanishing near unstable ridges. Then, silent zones where long-range beacons simply stopped responding. Entire star lanes were redirected, not by warning but by reaction. Traders rerouted before evidence. Military fleets changed patrols without conflict. Fear worked faster than policy. At the Dominion capital, High Marshal Tvin's former council seat had been sealed. A long crack ran through its stone base, repaired but still visible beneath the resin bonding. No nameplate remained, only a blank insert where history refused to settle. In the museum at Vorith Prime, a Thalrax cultural curator installed the last known relic of the compliance trials behind reinforced glass. A trial staff, split in half during a chamber dispute, rested upright. Visitors passed it in silence, eyes trailing to the inscription etched below. Darnax 6, the trial that wasn't. Far beyond official corridors, buried in the encrypted strata of the interstellar deepnet, one archive frame pulsed faintly. Unlisted, unindexed, no tags, only a single phrase on its cover string. We don't rebuild, we replace. The voice file attached was short. 36 seconds in total. Commander Halric Dorn spoke in measured tones, each word grounded in resolve. They sent us into fire thinking they'd watch bones turn to ash, but we didn't survive. We reshaped the flame, not for vengeance, for permanence. Delhi thought the trial would break us. They were wrong. It broke them. We never asked to lead, but if they insist on following, let them study the path we carved in stone. The file terminated with a final coded ping, log n Darnax 6// status doctrine validated. Back on Darnax, the tower array beneath the surface remained inert, buried in reinforced fault lines. Terraform activity ceased. No lights flickered, no units moved. Yet above the rift, a beacon pulsed. Faint but rhythmic, its glyph rotating in intervals recognizable only to those who had once tried to erase the Earth from records. The symbol said nothing, but every scan confirmed the signal remained intact. From orbit, the planet looked unchanged. A dead crust, scorched terrain, endless storms circling the equator. Yet no Dominion vessel crossed within scan range again. In Earth's archival summit chamber, a command official reviewed the last entry from Darnax's ledger. He didn't speak. He just read the report, marked it final, and forwarded it to closed doctrine registry. The button clicked with a dull sound. He turned to his aide. Mark that site dormant. What if it wakes? It won't. But if it ever does, it won't need our help. In the chamber's rear, a display case glowed under low internal lighting. The locket rested inside, untouched since the day Dorn returned it to Earth. No visitor ever asked who it belonged to, but every officer passing by knew why it was kept visible, not because of sentiment, but because it marked the place where Earth refused to be erased. In time, the phrase terraform compliance would enter military doctrine catalogs across 3 systems, not as threat, not as weapon, but as deterrent. A designation reserved for worlds touched only once, never contested again. And those who saw the symbol engraved into orbital stone knew one thing without doubt. This was never about survival, it was about memory. And humans had carved theirs deep enough that no storm, no ruler, no fleet could ever wash it away. What would you have done if you were in Commander Dorn's position? Build in silence or strike back openly? And which story you want to hear next? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every one. Like the video if you enjoyed the story, and subscribe for more epic HOI tales every week.